Please pray with me. Lead us, Lord. It seems easy for us to say, but sometimes it is hard for us to follow. For you call us into places that are unknown and unsure to us, places that require risk and trust. But lead us. Lead us, Lord. May my words be faithful. May all our hearts be open to the leading of your Spirit, now and in the days to come. Amen. It seems like there's always one in every group. There's always that one coworker, that one family member, that one church member who's always anticipating the worst, who in the face of some wonderful news or some happy development or some joyous celebration or even a miracle goes all negative. Simon Peter, he was one of those people. Throughout the Gospels, Peter seems to be the disciple who is always the most taken aback by Jesus' miracles, the most shocked that he ended up here with Jesus, the one who counts himself least deserving of the good things that happened to him. While James and John are arguing about which one of them is the greatest and who's going to be sitting next to Jesus in heaven, Peter's just begging for Jesus to keep him from sinking. When Jesus offers to wash his feet, Peter begs, "Oh no, God, wash all of me." And in our reading today, when Jesus presents the fishermen with the greatest catch they've ever seen in their life, Peter begs Jesus to leave him because he is not worthy of this gift. And yet, who can blame him? After all, life was hard for Simon Peter. He was just a poor fisherman living in a subsistence economy under the occupation of the greatest empire in the world. He and his colleagues worked 6 days, or rather nights a week, often with little to show for it. From what we can tell from the biblical text, Simon and his brother Andrew were probably in some kind of cooperative partnership with Zebedee and his sons, James and John. They may have pooled all of the resources they had to buy their boats and their nets, and that was all they owned. They invested everything in this risky business, trying to make a livelihood on a sea where storms could come up with little warning and a man could lose his life or his livelihood. And even on a good day, the empire was sure to take their cut. Fishermen paid taxes, of course, on whatever they caught or sold, and they also had to pay harbor usage fees to the Roman government, which means that every time they set out to fish, they were already in debt, and their daily income wasn't ever guaranteed. Simon's circumstances remind me a little of some of the people I met when door knocking this fall in an impoverished neighborhood in West Philadelphia during the presidential campaign. We would knock and try to engage them in conversation, but their response would be, "It doesn't matter whether I vote or not. Nothing ever changes around here." But one day, things do start to change for Simon. He goes to the synagogue to pray like he does every week, but this Saturday, a teacher named Jesus has come to town. And like everybody else, Simon is in awe of Jesus' teaching and the power of his words and the conviction with which he says them. Not only that, Jesus cast a demon out of Simon's neighbor, the one who had been possessed by an impure spirit for so long. Out of all the people in Capernaum that day, Jesus chooses to go home and to stay with Simon. Simon's mother-in-law is sick with a fever, and there was nothing that the family could do for her but pray. She might have even died. Plenty of people did die from fever in those days. But Jesus chooses Simon and goes to his home and heals his mother-in-law. And then people from all over the village start to come and to bring their sick for Jesus to heal to Simon's house. And the next night, Simon and his fellow fishermen go out to work as usual. They're out all night dropping their nets and pulling them up again, only to come up empty. And in the morning, tired and dirty and discouraged, Simon and his fellow fishermen are washing out their nets. They need them to be clean and dry, you see, so that they can try again tomorrow night. And at this point, Simon just wants to go home and eat breakfast and take a nap. But here comes Jesus, walking on the beach. And Simon can see even from a distance how the crowds are following him. When Jesus reaches Simon and his friends, he steps into the boat so he can preach to the people who are gathered on the beach. He asks Simon to row out just a little bit from shore so he can be heard. And Floyd's emphasis was perfect. We can imagine that Simon was a little tired. But he owes Jesus this favor. After all, Jesus healed his mother-in-law. And so he does as Jesus asks. But just then, as Jesus wraps up his teaching and turns to the fishermen, he tells Simon to row out a little further, to go back out into the deep water and drop his nets again. Simon, whose back is aching, his stomach is empty, and this instruction from Jesus, it makes no sense. What does this rabbi know about fishing anyway? The fishermen went out at night because, you see, the fish could see the nets during the day. And he's caught nothing all night. Certainly, he's not going to catch anything now that the sun is up. Simon knows this isn't going to work, but he does what Jesus asks anyhow. Only because you say so, he replies. And you know the rest of the story. Simon and his co-laborers haul in the biggest catch of fish they've ever had in their whole lives. This haul of fish is so great that Simon has to call the other fishermen to come and help him to get it into the boat. And it's overwhelming the boat so much that it is threatening to sink it. Simon's never had a catch like this before. This is enough fish to feed his family for a long time, to get him out of debt and give him a financial security he's never known in his life. But Simon doesn't celebrate. He falls on his knees and begs for Jesus to leave him. I am a sinful man, he confesses. And here's the thing, I think. It's not that Simon doubts the miracle. After all, the evidence is right there in front of him, flailing about in the boat. He questions whether or not he is worthy of it. Whether he is worthy of something so wonderful, so miraculous to happen to him, not because of some personal flaw or failing, but because things like this just don't happen to people like him. Now, I don't know about you, but Simon's response resonated with me. I mean, we all know what it means to keep our expectations low, don't we? To hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. To work day in and day out with little to show for it. We understand that this is mostly how the world works. And when something wonderful, truly amazing does happen to us, we might feel undeserving. Like, what's the catch? No pun intended. Or now that this good thing has happened, when's the rug going to get pulled out from under me? The writer and social science researcher Brené Brown calls this feeling foreboding joy. She argues that joy is the most vulnerable human emotion because we know that happiness can be fleeting and susceptible to change. She writes, when we feel joy, it is a place of incredible vulnerability. Its beauty and fragility and deep gratitude and impermanence are all wrapped up in one experience. And when we can't tolerate that level of vulnerability, joy actually becomes foreboding. And we immediately move to self-protection. It's as if we grab vulnerability by the shoulders and say, you will not catch me off guard. You will not sucker punch me with this pain. I will be prepared and ready for you. So maybe we can understand Simon's response to this miracle, how it made him feel and his plea to have Jesus just leave him alone. This was the most amazing thing that had ever happened to him, and why him? And what now? Simon had never felt more exposed to the possibility of hope, more vulnerable in the face of wonder and awe and joy. His response echoes the prophet Isaiah when he encountered God. Woe is me. I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And yet my eyes have seen the Lord of hosts. And you see, Simon knew, just as Isaiah knew that from this moment on, his life had changed forever. That deep down, he must have known that he was never going to fish again. And not because this windfall meant that he could retire and hang up his nets and just enjoy a life of ease. No, Jesus was calling him to something totally different. Something even more risky and more unknown, to even deeper waters than he had ever experienced. I think Simon Peter knew that Jesus was going to keep calling him to do things that made no sense, and to keep taking risks and rowing out into deep water and trusting Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. And beloved, I believe that this is what it means for us to have faith now, especially now. When Jesus tells Simon to row his boat back out and drop his nets again, Simon doesn't respond, "Oh, of course, that makes perfect sense." He says, "Master, we worked hard all night and we didn't catch anything. But if you say so, I will let my nets down again." And I think this is a true and beautiful picture of faith, because more often than not, our faith is raw and messy. Simon has faith in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of doubt, despite all evidence to the contrary. Simon says yes. This is the good news, my friends. That faith and doubt, and confidence and questions, and progress and obstacles, and grief and joy, these things can coexist. When we find ourselves struggling to believe, when we can't see the entire path and we doubt that we ever will, that is the time when we cast our nets again and trust Jesus. I know it can be hard, especially now, to continue to believe that things are going to change for the better. Sometimes it feels like all our efforts are just a drop in the bucket compared to all that is wrong in the world. All the systems that are set up to keep people stuck. But in these moments, in this moment, faith can look like saying, I don't know if this is going to work, but if you say so, Jesus, I'm going to give it a shot. It can be saying, I don't know if loving my neighbor is going to make any impact, but I'm going to try. I don't know if living a life of generosity is really a better way to live, but Jesus, if you call me to it, I will do it. It can look like, I don't know if praying for those who wrong me or who I call my enemies is worthwhile, but I will try my best. In these moments, I would invite us to just remember that Jesus called fishermen to be his first disciples. Jesus drew from those people who were considered to be the lowliest in society and raised them up to be the most significant, because over and over and over again, God works through those who are humble. Jesus looks for those who are pure in heart. God speaks through the ones who are marginalized and who are outcast. And God uses simple, ordinary things like bread and fish and bodies to offer salvation to the world. Dumbarton, please keep holding fast to your faith. Do not lose heart. Because those who expect great things don't always see it. And those who look for God in places of power and wealth and privilege, they're going to miss it. Those who think themselves worthy and deserving may instead find themselves empty-handed when it comes to God's blessing. But those like Simon, and like many of you, who labor day in and day out, who trust in God's goodness and wonder-working power despite the prevailing principalities, those of us who are willing to keep putting our nets out over and over again, we may find that our efforts are not in vain, and that God's grace has multiplied our efforts far beyond what we could ever imagine. May it be so.
Now at this time of giving our gifts, we appreciate your gifts to support the ongoing ministries of Dumbarton Church. You may place your offerings in one of the boxes in the back of the wall near the exit doors, or online. You can also use this QR code to go directly to Dumbarton Online's giving page. And now for our offertorial by the Dumbarton United Methodist Choir.